My argument is that we should try our very best to treat people without regard to race, both in our personal lives and our public policy.
Of course.
And the reason I wrote this book, thank you. The reason I wrote this book is because in the past 10 years, it has become very popular to, in the name of anti-racism, teach a kind of philosophy to our children and in general that says your race is everything, right? And I think that is the wrong way to fight racism, and that's why I wrote this book at this time.
And so many in the Black community, if I'm being honest with you, because I want to be, believe that you are being used as a pawn by the right and that you're a charlatan of sorts.
He's not a Republican.
So how do you...
He's never voted for a Republican.
You've said that you're a conservative.
No.
No, you did. You actually said that in the podcast that you did 2 weeks ago.
I said I was a conservative.
Yes, you did. So, but my question to you is, how do you respond to those critics?
Okay, let's give it. Let him answer.
First thing I want to
say that socioeconomics picks out people in a better way than race. When you do look at the socioeconomics, you see the huge disparity between white households and Black households. You see the huge disparity between white households and Hispanic households. So your argument, and I've read your book twice because I wanted to give it a chance, argument that race has no place in that equation is really fundamentally flawed, in my opinion.
well...
It started with one man walking straight into the lion's den, a calm voice surrounded by chaos. He sat across from the Views panel, ready to challenge a room that wasn't known for letting opposing voices breathe. His message? That race should not be the lens through which we view every issue. Instead, we should focus on class, help the poor regardless of their skin color, and racial equality will follow. Simple. Bold. But apparently too much for daytime television.
Two separate questions. One is whether each racial group is socioeconomically the same. That I agree with you, they're not.
Yeah, they're not, and the stats show that.
Yeah, of course, I agree with that fully. The question is, how do you address that in the way that actually targets poverty the best?
Great.
And what Martin Luther King wrote in his book, Why We Can't Wait, is he called it, we need a Bill of Rights for the disadvantaged. And he said, yes, we should address racial inequality, yes, we should address the legacy of slavery, but the way to do that is on the basis of class. And that will disproportionately target Blacks and Hispanics because they're disproportionately poor, but it will be doing so in a way that also helps the white poor, in a way that addresses poverty as the thing to be addressed.
He wasn't shouting, he wasn't attacking, but his words were a grenade tossed into the safe space of identity politics. He argued that race-based thinking once used to divide is now being dressed up as social justice, and it's being pushed onto kids in schools, politicians in office, and celebrities on air. He called it out for what it is, a dangerous reversal of progress.
A student of Dr. King. I'm not only a student of Dr. King, I know his daughter, Bernice, right? So I'm going to get to my question.
Go ahead, go right ahead.
This is fundamentally flawed. You claim that colorblindness was the goal of the civil rights movement, based upon Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, content of character versus the color of skin. Bernice's daughter points out that 4 years after giving that speech, actually, Dr. King also said this: a society that has done something special against the Negro for hundreds of years must now do something special for Negroes. He also said in 1968, it was about less than a week before he was assassinated, this country never stops to realize that they owe a people kept in slavery for 244 years. So rather than class, he did write about that earlier on. Right before his death, he made the argument for racial equality and racial reparations. And so...
Teaching kids that skin color is their identity, he said, is not how you end racism, it's how you keep it alive. And right there, in the middle of that set, things started to shift. Some eyebrows raised, some eyes rolled. But the conversation was far from over. Because the moment you challenge the sacred narrative, the one that says race must be the focus, you're not just disagreeing, you're threatening an entire worldview. By the way, before we continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow and share more intriguing stories. Now let's continue.
I think is something that the right has co-opted. And so many in the Black community, if I'm being honest with you, because I want to be, believe that you are being used as a pawn by the right and that you're a charlatan of sorts.
He's not a Republican.
So how do you?
He's
who am I
never
being
voted for a
used by?
Republican.
You said that you're a conservative.
No, no.
No, you did. You actually said that in a podcast that you did 2 weeks ago.
I said I was a conservative.
Yes, yes, you did. So,
That's when things took a sharp turn. One of the co-hosts, Sunny Hostin, didn't waste a second. She came in swinging not with facts, but with accusations. She called him a pawn, said he was being used by the right, and even questioned whether he was a charlatan. The atmosphere instantly changed. It was no longer a conversation, it was a setup. She tried to paint him as a conservative, even though he openly said he wasn't. She claimed he was parroting right-wing talking points, even as others on the panel, her own co-hosts, stepped in to clarify that he wasn't even a Republican. But the damage was already done. The goal wasn't to debate his ideas, it was to discredit him personally. Classic tactic: if you can't beat the argument, attack the person.
to you, my question to you is, how do you respond to those critics?
Okay, let's give him. Let him answer.
First thing, it's very important. The quote that you just pointed out about doing something special for the Negro. That's from the book Why We Can't Wait that I just mentioned.
Yes.
A couple paragraphs later, he lays out exactly what that something special was,
Yes.
and it was the Bill of Rights for the Disadvantaged, a broad class-based policy.
But he also says
okay?
you must include race.
No, he didn't. He says it's
Yes, he does.
Okay, well, everyone should go read the book Why We Can't Wait. Let's not get sidetracked. I don't think I've been co-opted by anyone. I've only voted twice, both for Democrats. Although I'm an independent, I would vote for a Republican, probably a non-Trump Republican if they were compelling. I don't think there's any evidence I've been co-opted by anyone, and I think that's an ad hominem tactic people use to not address really the important conversations we're having here. And he's better, and it would be better for everyone if we stuck to the topics rather than make it about me with
it's
no
not about
evidence
you, but
that I've been co-opted.
I want to give you the opportunity to respond to
I appreciate
the criticism.
I appreciate it. There's no evidence that I've been co-opted by anyone. I have an independent podcast. I work for CNN as an analyst. I write for the Free Press. I'm independent in all of these endeavors, and no one is paying me to say what I'm saying. I'm saying it because I feel.
What made it more surreal was the way she twisted his beliefs. He never said racism doesn't exist. He never said history should be ignored. What he said was that we can fight inequality more effectively by targeting poverty. But instead of addressing that idea, Sunny went straight for character assassination, hoping that labeling him would shut the conversation down.
At the anti-racism movement, there are a couple of people, I don't even know who they are, maybe you know who
Robin
they are.
DiAngelo.
Robin DiAngelo,
Yeah.
Ibram Kendi, for instance.
Okay. Well, you say that is just another form of racism, and you even say it has a lot in common with white supremacy. How can you compare those two things?
I compare
about
them because-
anti-racism, you're comparing it to white supremacy.
Because they both view your race as an extremely significant part of who you are. So white supremacists, they obviously say, we all know what they say, okay? Neo-racists like Rob DiAngelo, they say that to be white is to be ignorant, for example. Well, this is a racial stereotype, and I want to call a spade and say this is not the style of anti-racism we have to be teaching our kids. We should be teaching them that your race is not a significant feature of who you are. Who you are is your character, your value, and your skin color doesn't say anything about that.
This wasn't just debate. This was public shaming in real time, on national TV, and the audience was watching it unfold like a courtroom drama with Sunny playing judge, jury, and executioner. But he didn't flinch. And that made it even more dangerous for her. Because when someone stays calm under fire, people start to listen. And that's exactly what made the next moment so uncomfortable for Sunny.
That's actually misrepresenting what Robin DiAngelo's position is.
It's in her book.
But a lot of
So here we go. Here we go.
Misrepresenting.
Thank you.
He laid it out in plain terms. If Black and Hispanic people are disproportionately poor, then helping poor people as a class will naturally help those racial groups. You don't need to sort by skin color. You sort by need. And guess what? That method helps everyone who's struggling, including poor white families, poor Asian families, anyone at the bottom. Now, here's where it got wild. Sunny tried to clap back by saying, well, there's a huge wealth gap between white and Black households. But she didn't realize. She had just made his argument for him. If Black and Hispanic communities are overrepresented among the poor, then any policy aimed at helping poor people will still disproportionately help them. She backed herself into a corner, then tried to act like she'd just made a brilliant point. The audience clapped. But not because it made sense, it was just reflex clap when Sunny talks, even if the logic doesn't track. She called his argument fundamentally flawed, without ever explaining why. It was like watching someone lose a debate and then just say, "You're wrong," louder and louder, hoping nobody notices they've got nothing left. But the viewers noticed. And more importantly, the panel started noticing too. A few of them stopped backing Sunny's attack. Because whether they agreed with him or not, they knew what just happened. She had walked right into his logic and lost. Then came the moment where Coleman flipped the entire conversation with one quiet reference: Martin Luther King Jr. He didn't just throw out MLK's name for show. He cited King's own words, specifically from the book Why We Can't Wait. In it, King calls for a Bill of Rights for the disadvantaged, not a race-based handout, a class-based solution. "Help the poor because they are poor," King said, "and you'll help the Black community by default because they are overrepresented among the poor." It was clear, direct, and backed by history. But Sunny wasn't having it. She pushed back hard, claiming MLK wanted race-based reparations, quoting a speech from just before his death. "You must include race," she insisted. But what she left out and what Coleman calmly reminded her was that even in that same book, King spelled out what he meant by something special. It wasn't cash payouts based on skin color. It was policy that lifts the disadvantaged regardless of race. You could feel the tension rise. Sunny tried to twist King's legacy to support her view, but Coleman came with receipts, paragraphs, page numbers. He didn't need to shout. He just knew what he was talking about. The panel started shifting again. The more Sunny tried to argue, the more obvious it became she wasn't debating the facts. She was clinging to a narrative. And the deeper she went, the more people started to question if that narrative actually made any sense anymore. Now, here's where it got downright awkward. While Sunny kept insisting that race should be the center of everything, people started noticing something off. She was passionately rejecting class-based politics while sitting there in a Gucci button-down and belt worth more than what some people make in a week. That detail didn't go unnoticed. In fact, it became a punchline across the internet. How can you preach about racial struggle and fairness while draped in designer labels, rejecting the exact policies that would help all poor people, regardless of color? And then, to make things even more ironic, progressive voices, the ones you'd expect to back Sunny, started siding with Coleman, loudly. People like Anna from the Young Turks came out and said, "Look, I don't agree with Coleman on everything, but the man makes thoughtful, well-reasoned arguments." She even admitted that his analysis challenges her own views sometimes. That's huge coming from someone firmly planted on the left. So now, the whole "he's a right-wing pawn" angle, it crumbled. If the most liberal, anti-conservative commentators are defending this guy, how can he possibly be a puppet for the right? What Sunny didn't realize is that this wasn't just a debate about policy, it was a moment where her own credibility started to fall apart. She came in thinking she could frame Coleman as the outsider, the traitor, the sellout. But it was clear now, she was the one out of step, and everyone was starting to see it. And at that point, even the other women on The View had to step in. They weren't jumping to agree with Coleman on every point, but they were noticing the way Sunny kept dodging his actual argument. Every time he spoke about policy, she shot back with personal attacks. So finally, they gave him space to talk. Not because they agreed, because they could see he wasn't even being allowed to finish a sentence. And when he finally did, he didn't defend himself with emotion. He didn't swing back. He just laid it out clearly. He's not a Republican, never voted for one, and he doesn't take money from anyone. He runs an independent podcast, works as a CNN analyst, and writes for an independent outlet. That's it. No donors, no political party whispering in his ear. Sunny's entire attack, this whole idea that he's a pawn of the right, collapsed right there on the table. Then, just when it looked like Sunny might try to pivot, she dropped one more name: Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter. She said she knew her personally. Like that was supposed to end the discussion. But it didn't land. It sounded like a desperate flex, as if knowing someone famous somehow proved her point. The audience could feel it. Coleman had shown up with facts, logic, and quotes. Sunny had shown up with labels and name drops. And by now, it wasn't hard to tell which one actually understood the issue. But Sunny wasn't done yet. Still trying to win the moment, she brought up another MLK, quote, this time from just before his death, saying the country owed something special to Black Americans because of slavery. Her argument? That this proved King did support race-based policies. But Coleman had already addressed that earlier. He reminded Herond, everyone watching, that King defined that something special as the Bill of Rights for the disadvantaged, which was explicitly class-based. Sunny tried to twist that quote to fit her narrative, but the context didn't back her up. And now, she was starting to look like someone who was cherry-picking lines while ignoring the full message. Meanwhile, Coleman never moved off course. He stuck to what King wrote, not just what he said in a soundbite. And the irony? The exact strategy Sunny was pushing, focusing everything on race, was eerily similar to how white supremacists view the world. Coleman didn't say that lightly. He explained that if both racists and so-called anti-racists are obsessing over skin color, they're using the same framework, just in reverse. One group says race makes you inferior. The other says race makes you owed something, but both refuse to look beyond the color of your skin. That was the real mic drop. Because in trying so hard to make race the only issue, Sunny was proving his point for him over and over again. And the more she argued, the more obvious it became. At this point, Coleman had already won over a good chunk of the room. But he wasn't done. He leaned into the heart of his argument: you don't need race-based policies to achieve racial progress. If you help the class that's struggling the most, which happens to include many Black and Hispanic communities, then you're solving two problems at once: poverty and racial disparity. It's practical. It's fair, and most importantly, it doesn't exclude anyone based on their skin color. He even said it straight up: if your real goal is to lift Black and brown people out of poverty, then help all poor people. Race doesn't need to be part of the equation because it will be addressed automatically by focusing on the class where inequality lives. But here's what made it sting: wasn't saying this to play it safe or avoid controversy. He was saying it because, to him, it was common sense. And the fact that Sunny kept rejecting it, even after making arguments that supported it, just made her look worse. She wasn't even disagreeing with his logic, she was just mad that it didn't center race in the way she wanted. By now, it wasn't even a debate anymore. It was a slow unraveling of a mainstream idea right there, live on TV. And Coleman was doing it with nothing more than calm words and bulletproof reasoning. But Sunny had one last card to play, and it was desperation at its finest. She doubled down on accusing Coleman of being co-opted by the right. You could see the frustration building. She had lost control of the narrative, and now she was falling back on the oldest trick in the book. If you can't beat the message, attack the messenger. She called him a pawn, a sellout, even questioned his intentions. But he didn't flinch. He calmly replied, "I've only voted twice both times for Democrats. I'm an independent. No one's paying me to say what I say." And you could feel it, the audience knew she had nothing left. The other co-hosts started backing off. One of them reminded the table that Coleman's work is respected even by liberal voices. He writes for independent outlets, works with major networks, and is known for not falling in line with any political side. Even some of the most left-leaning commentators online had already vouched for him. People who disagree with him on real political issues still admitted that he debates in good faith. Sunny had tried to throw mud on his name, but none of it stuck. Because instead of unraveling under pressure, Coleman stood even taller. His point had been simple from the start: fix the root problem, poverty, and you help everyone. Race doesn't have to be weaponized to do good. But if you insist on making race everything, then you're not solving inequality, you're just flipping it. And then came the part that left no doubt about what this whole showdown was really about. Coleman turned his focus to the anti-racism movement, the one that's been pushed heavily in recent years by authors like Robin DiAngelo and Ibram Kendi. The movement that claims to fight racism by constantly centering everything around race. But here's what he said: this version of anti-racism is just racism wearing new clothes. He pointed out the uncomfortable truth: both white supremacists and today's anti-racists believe race is the most important thing about a person. One group says white people are superior. The other says being white makes you guilty, privileged, or ignorant by default. Either way, it's a racial stereotype. Either way, you're judging people by skin color. And Coleman wasn't afraid to say it out loud. That's still racism. Then he quoted directly from DiAngelo's own book. To be white is to be ignorant. That's not equality. That's not justice. That's a racial smear, and it's being taught to kids under the label of progress. He didn't make it up. It's right there in print. But the moment you criticize it, people like Sunny call you a traitor. And here's what made the audience sit up. Coleman wasn't ranting. He was warning. This movement, he said, is repeating the same logic used by racists in the past, just in a reverse direction. And if we don't see that, we're not moving forward, we're going in circles. At this point, the tension on set was thick enough to slice through. Even Whoopi Goldberg, who rarely hides her emotions, looked visibly fed up with how Sunny kept doubling down. You could see it in her face. The eye rolls, the heavy sighs. She wasn't siding with Coleman, but it was clear she was done with the nonsense. Done with Sunny's long-winded detours, the personal digs, the refusal to actually engage with the core argument. And then Coleman dropped one last truth bomb that sealed the entire discussion. He reminded everyone of the core message of Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech, that people should be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. That wasn't just a poetic moment, it was the entire foundation of the civil rights movement. And somehow, the same people who praise King now want to tear down that message in the name of justice. He explained that anti-racism today has stopped being about equality and has turned into a new form of discrimination, a philosophy that teaches people to see skin color first and everything else second. And that, he said, is exactly what King fought against. The crowd didn't cheer, the panel didn't clap, but everyone knew exactly what just happened. Coleman didn't just hold his own, he flipped the entire conversation. Calmly, clearly, and without a single insult. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments. See you on the next one.